This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great platform that makes it easy and simple for you to buy, hold, and sell and earn crypto. You can trade from anything to anything. For example, you can trade between cryptocurrencies and precious metals. It's an amazing platform that I've been using for years. And in fact, I still use to this day because they're one, a great exchange, they're reputable, and they're one of the only exchanges that still lists XRP. Many of the other exchanges have delisted XRP due to the SEC lawsuit, but you can still get XRP on Uphold. So I've interviewed the CEO, the founder, and many other representatives from Uphold over the years, and I'm a fan of this platform. And once again, there's some great features like trading between different assets very easily. You don't have to convert to a currency and so forth. They're used by 10 plus million users. They have over 200 cryptocurrencies. And they have a very easy to use app. The interface is really nice. So I can certainly vouch for this platform. Once again, I've been a user for years. So if you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Ron Hammond, who's Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association. Ron, great to have you back on.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Ron, man, I'm shell shocked. This week is wild, and I can't imagine what the talk is in DC with this FTX Sam Bankman-Fried debacle. What are you hearing?
You know, for a week, I thought it was going to be all about the elections and how that's going to play the impact of just what crypto policy is going to look like for next year. Has all been out the window just because, A, the election's still ongoing. We really don't know exactly where the Senate's at the current moment when this is being recorded. But at the same time, yeah, this whole FTX thing was unraveling. And ironically, of all things, this issue started in DC. And so it's been really weird to see from a DC perspective just how the fallout has really happened. Because, you know, some can argue this all started with the lobbying efforts of FTX and how aggressive they were, and also were making decisions to do things on their own rather than going with the rest of the industry on what legislation would look like in this space. So from the folks on the Hill, everyone's been pretty shell shocked as well. One thing I'll also say is that SBF was always on Capitol Hill. He's on Capitol Hill more than any CEO of any industry, to my knowledge. When I was on the Hill, lobbying offices as well, it's pretty often I would run into him doing his own thing. And so a lot of staffers and members of Congress personally have met with SBF, not once, not twice, sometimes 3 or 4 times the past 6 months. And so there's also that personal connection to the CEO, which has been pretty rare in at least this space, but also in most of policy, that there's now a personality and almost an attachment to SBF that you really just don't have in other industries who usually either vilify or praise certain CEOs. So this dramatic turnaround has been quite a lot on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, man, and he's made a lot of campaign donations. I think probably the most of any crypto CEO or company, right?
100%. Those things are bifurcated. So, the staff that's writing legislation, they're not supposed to know, anything about donations. Now, mind you, there's open secrets and there's, websites you can see who's donated to your campaign. But when you're an official staffer who works on Capitol Hill for a member of Congress or for a certain committee, you're not supposed to give any deferential treatment to certain donors or people who have donated to your boss or others in the past. They're just coming to you as a stakeholder. So, but at the same time, there's just still in the back of your mind, this man is supportive of the industry. And in his case, probably by far the most supportive of candidates, especially on the Democrat side of the aisle. So those donations are going to be pretty important, especially when you consider that the DCCPA, the Digital Commodity Consumer Protection Act, that really was the crux of all of this, has been largely viewed in DC as the FTX bill. So if you're a member of Congress who has taken money, which is a lot of them, I mean, a very large majority in the Senate especially, who's taken money from SBF, do you vote on a bill that has been seen as the FTX bill, regardless of what your political affiliation is, or regardless of where you feel in crypto? The political optics of this is pretty, could be pretty nasty. And so I think a lot of folks are going to be hesitant to even move on anything about this, even though right now on Capitol Hill, a lot of folks are saying, what happened? Why did this occur? And what could have been done to prevent it?
Oh, yeah. To your point, I'm sure that bill that's going in the garbage now, right?
It'll make a reappearance. Legislation always does. We start all over again in January, so that's when all the new members who just got elected will come in. And so by far, this will be an issue that it gets touched on in the future. We will probably see the text of the DCCPA come back in some way, shape, or form, but it will definitely be away from FTX, at least in this current stage. Mind you, of course, a lot of things can change, but I think a lot of folks are going to say, how do we prevent the FTX situation from happening when we look back at this bill?
Yeah, absolutely. So our folks in DC, I'm sure there's some anger there. This guy lied to us like right in front of our faces. He was in the hallways, he was lobbying, he was doing all that stuff. And wow, I mean, it's just an epic collapse.
Yeah, and I think that's the odd part too, because he is genuinely just a very nice person. And so even a lot of people who are seeing the facts and circumstances laid out in front of them, at least right now, they're still trying to baffle with, hey, look, was he actually lying to me? Was there actual fraud here? It looks like there was. So when he was lobbying us on issues like commingling of funds or stable coins, like were these things truthful? And these are a lot of questions that are still being wrapped around here. Speaking as a lobbyist here, and I know FTX has plenty of lobbyists as well. They definitely probably did not know anything about what was going on at FTX. So. Right. By no means do I want to put the blame on them. I think it's, since the CEO was there personally there all the time, there's a lot of questions. And just now the CEO is not there. And candidly, I'm not even sure the lobbyists are going to be there as well. And so there's a lot of questions that staffers and members of Congress are now picking up the pieces on. So groups like the Blockchain Association, DeFi Education Fund, and others are having to step up and say, let's just level set. Let's explain from what we're seeing and when we're talking to our memberships what the industry is thinking going forward. But my phone has been blowing up nonstop the past 48 hours. I've never seen anything like this on the Hill. And again, this is just from staffers. The members of Congress are just now starting to get familiarized with what the situation is. Tom Emmer has sent a tweet, Patrick McHenry, Maxine Waters. So the members are now just starting to get the briefs from the staff. And I think Monday, when they come back into session next week, it's going to be all the more talk of the town in DC.
Wow. Now, this morning, SEC Chair Gary Gensler went on CNBC. He was asked questions about his meeting with FTX and Sam and the folks there, and how this happened under his watch. And he kind of dodged a lot of questions. And there's a lot of criticism coming with, okay, you caught the kids stealing the cookie from the cookie jar, Kim Kardashian and library and whatever, but the bank robbers are emptying out the vault and they're right under your nose. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen next. I saw Tom Emmer's tweet, but this looks really bad.
It does. Yeah, it definitely does. And, at least to Gensler's points today, I don't want to, defend him too much here, but there is still a question of what exactly does the SEC have a role here? Since this is outside the U.S. jurisdiction, there's a lot of questions that have to be raised. And so he went back to a lot of his talking points that he's reiterated in the past. The exchanges need to come in and register with the SEC, as well as stablecoins are actually not stablecoins. They're actually securities. And the SEC has lost, especially on the stablecoin stuff recently, not within Congress, but also within the regulators themselves. Even a lot of the fellow regulators with the SEC have said these mostly aren't securities. In fact, I don't think any are securities for the most part. These belong in different regulatory environments. The SEC and Gensler are doubling down today, saying, I think these stablecoins actually look like money market funds. These are securities, especially if you're going to get yields. And at the same time, exchanges need to come in and register. And a lot of folks in the industry are saying, where was the SEC? What's going on? But at the same time, careful what you wish for, because if folks are saying, look, these exchanges are doing some pretty sketchy things, we think, then he's been saying exchanges come in and register or an enforcement action is going to happen. I can easily see an enforcement action happening now because there's just so much outcry on this. And let's not forget, too, though, in this case, it's kind of odd because a lot of retail folks in the United States weren't harmed in this situation. Sure. And so there isn't as much of an outcry in terms of retail folks getting harmed here, at least at the current moment. And so that usually resonates really heavily on the Hill. And that's why Luna, for example, was definitely a different story where there was a lot of people harmed. In this case, it's still more the businesses themselves, again, at the current moment. And so the outcry right now is mostly on the institutional side, which is pretty unique. But it's definitely still raising a lot of alarms in DC. And by far, the regulators will be determined to act if Congress doesn't.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the FTX situation. To your point, like you mentioned, Luna is Celsius, Voyager, and all these folks. It's like all the big collapses, the SEC was nowhere to be found. But there's a victory lap for Kim Kardashian, so folks are just like, what's going on?
Yeah, and at some point too, also the Ripple case is actually holding up a lot of what the SEC can and can't do.
Mm.
It is a very massive case. It has drawn out for quite some time, but the implications are massive. And so I think at some point the SEC is going to either say we have to wait for this case to finish up, which I think was largely the tactic they were taking for a while. But now there's a lot of political pressure and pressure just from folks on the outside saying that you guys got to step it up on the enforcement side, or at least you'll go after these bad actors. And it can get pretty aggressive very quickly if he wanted to. So we'll see what happens. But for the large part, earlier, the Ripple case was holding off a lot of these enforcement actions from what we were hearing from our sources. So we'll see if that changes in the next couple of days or months, I'd say.
So Ron, you have this FTX collapse and debacle, and you have the complaints coming against the SEC. Will this cause Congress to say, okay, we need emergency regulations? We need to get a hold of this. Do you think that may happen?
100%. That's typically the MO for Congress. When the bad action happens, there's a equal and opposite reaction from Congress. We at least in the crypto space, we saw this with Terra, for example, and Luna. We saw that the algorithmic stablecoins are crashing. Mostly Democrats stepped up and said, we need to ban all algorithmic stablecoins. On the CBDC front, Republicans saw the Canadian trucker situation, and they said, you know what, we need to ban CBDCs. And so what we're going to probably see is some folks on the extreme say, we need to ban these kind of business practices. We need to ban crypto or something to that effect. And it's going to raise a lot of media attention. But as we've kind of seen from the past, there is a little coalescing meet in the middle saying, okay, let's not go on the extremes here. Regulation is important. It's necessary. So let's have a good dialogue and push that forward. The thing that was time. Congress runs out of time by the end of the year, and they restart. But the thing about crypto is that it's a bipartisan issue. So it's not like the Democrats, let's just say that the Democrats were to lose the Senate and they were to lose the House. There's not a political motivation saying we have to do this now, or the Republicans are just going to sideline this until we come back in power. That's not the case. Being bipartisan, you have Republicans and Democrats saying, if we don't get to it this year, we're still going to get to it, regardless of who's in power. So now it might change a little bit of what the bill or legislation looks like. But the good thing is that Congress, regardless of who's in power, is still attentive to this issue. It just depends on which direction they go, depending on the political power in charge, or at least the person who's in charge of writing the legislation.
Now, to your point of the midterm elections and figuring out who's going to have what, who's going to win, I know Congressman Tom Emmer and a lot of Republicans, if they take back the House, I believe he said they will have the gavel in their hand to, keep the regulators in check, so to speak, such as Gary Gensler. Let's say the Republicans take the House. What do you think will be the next actions coming from like Tom Emmer and those folks and Huizinga and so forth?
Yeah, so I think the major players to watch are going to be Patrick McHenry. He is going to be probably the biggest player in this space for the next 2 years. He'll be in charge of the House Financial Services Committee, most likely. Again, the House is looking pretty likely will be Republican, but it's still a lot of stuff in the air at the moment. So he'll be the one holding the pen for a lot of legislation. You also have to look at the subcommittee folks. These are the people who also can write legislation within their own jurisdictions within financial services. So to your point, Representative Huizinga is probably really important as well. Warren Davidson, Tom Emmer. Tom Emmer might go into leadership for the Republican Party, so he might be actually even more powerful than potentially Patrick McHenry to some extent. So that's going to be important on the Republican side for the House. On the Democrat side, we saw Jim Himes actually on CoinDesk the other day say, look, I'm going to work with Patrick McHenry and get some stablecoin legislation done. So we see some, pretty pragmatic Democrats saying we need to work on this. And there's a lot of them actually now too. So I think it's going to be good to see some bipartisan legislation, because regardless of who wins the Senate, Patrick McHenry is going to have to get this signed by a Democrat president. And so if he wants to get anything across the finish line, it's got to be bipartisan and it's got to have buy-in from the administration. So it's going to be a tough needle to thread. But largely, depending on, no matter what happens, at least with the Senate, we both know that Sherrod Brown, who's the Senate banking chair, and Tim Scott, he's from South Carolina, he'll be the lead Republican. Regardless of which two of those in power, crypto really isn't that big of a priority for either. They're focusing a lot more on housing issues. And so I think a lot of the action that we're seeing right now is going to be in the Senate, or sorry, in the House compared to the Senate, even though we do have a lot of Senate champions like Senator Lummis from Wyoming and Senator Gillibrand from New York. But they just aren't in the committee positions of power as much as like Nick Henry, Huizinga, and others.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Ron, I mean, look, we'll figure out who wins what, I guess by next week or so. Yeah, we'll see, right? And then I don't know if there's this contagion of the, the FTX collapse, if it's going to spread to other companies, BlockFi, I don't know. But is it kind of, all crypto regulations or discussions are probably on hold now to see where the dust settles with this situation?
Correct. At least in my conversations, again, we're only a couple days, or I mean, I'd say in this, we're still in the hours of this. Every single staffer or member of Congress I'm talking to right now, it's still very much of we're shell shocked. We're figuring out what's happening. It's less of the, we need to ban this, or we need to get rid of these kind of exchanges or what have you, or we need to ban crypto. Those haven't come out just yet. I think those kind of come out when the members of Congress are back in town, and they aren't the most substantive takes. But we'll probably see some of that stuff. Again, we'll probably see some letters from members of Congress as well. I can see Elizabeth Warren doing another letter on this situation. I can see Patrick McHenry and Tom Emmer doing another letter, maybe more pro-crypto, but still asking for regulation. And so I think we're going to see a lot more media pushes from members of Congress. But again, I just want to make sure folks understand it's a very short timeline to get something done by the end of the year. So it is very likely this is going to be a February, March, April kind of situation, because when the Congress comes back in January, they got to figure out who's going to be in what committees, who's going to be voting where. And then once they all get all organized, then they got to come up with the agenda of what they want to accomplish. So as we see this contagion effect roll out, it's definitely going to see how much of a priority it is for these members of Congress to work on a bill like this, or to improve other bills to get something across the finish line. So we will see what happens. But one thing's for sure, everyone across the aisle is saying we got to get some crypto regulation signed into law. And if we don't get it by this year, which again, I'm putting pretty low chances, 2023 Q2, Q1 are going to be really important.
Let's hope they're able to move fast on that, because it's definitely needed.
Sure.
Ron, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Happy to help.